Today we got to talk about Texas and its starting quarterback battle, which seems to have a winner, and all that's coming up after the bumper.
Don't be cornering me. Hold up. Time. You gotta help me with that corner shit.
What's up, kidfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on Step Mill. Consider hitting the like and subscribe button because I upload a video every single day. It's always college football related, sports related. We have a good time. Today, I want to talk about Hudson Card versus Casey Thompson, and according to Chip Brown over at Horns247, we have a starting quarterback. To my surprise, it is Hudson Card, who apparently was basically able to hold onto the ball and take sacks, where Casey Thompson was apparently forcing the ball into the defense and, yes, had some interceptions. But this is interesting to me because I always thought that Casey Thompson would have had the job if for no other reason than the way in which he acquitted himself in the Alamo Bowl when there was no Sam Ehlinger. 8 of 10, 4 TDs. Half of his passes in that game resulted in touchdowns and helped turn a 24-17 lead into a 55-23 rout of Colorado, who, by the way, also made it to a bowl game last year, right? And then there's Hudson Card, who was recruited by Sarkisian to Alabama before basically being the third-string quarterback behind Sam Ehlinger. And I got a feel for Casey on this for a number of reasons, not the least of which is a couple years ago, he went into the transfer portal. And Tom Herman talked him out of going in the transfer portal because I thought at the time that man would have been a shoo-in to start at a place like Oregon, where Anthony Brown ends up coming from Boston College to basically usurp Tyler Shuck. Tyler Shuck transfers to Texas Tech, where he'll be the starting quarterback. I know that Oregon fans want Ty Thompson to be that guy. I just don't think he's going to be that guy in 2021. I think Anthony Brown is some form of Trace McSorley at Penn State, with Joe Moorhead being the offensive coordinator at Oregon. But I think what Sarkisian is saying in naming Hudson the starter against Louisiana is real cut and dry. You got to take care of the football for him. You got to exist between those 2 seconds. You take the snap and hand him to Bijan Robinson, and then you got to be able to hit play action passes to guys like Joshua Moore, especially knowing that you're going to work in a bunch of guys that I'm sure Texas fans know a bunch about, but perhaps the national crowd, like the folks that watch this channel, don't know a whole lot about. But they're going to be a running team for me, right? But that's not saying much, because Alabama last year was a running team with Najee Harris in the backfield, and they still had 2 first-round draft picks at wide receiver on that offense, to say nothing of Mac Jones, who ends up getting drafted in the first round, how good that offensive line was. I think you have that sort of ability at Texas. You have to be able to exploit it. I also think that this means that Hudson Card's probably going to be on a shorter leash than perhaps Casey Thompson might have, because this is Casey's last year to play college football, basically. And I thought that you would ride with the experienced guy so that, you know, you have that guy in the back, Hudson Card, that can actually come in there a little bit later if things slide off, and Casey would have got an opportunity to prove that the job shouldn't be his. On the other hand, you could just as easily see a Hudson Card go into the transfer portal rather than perhaps a Casey Thompson if Hudson Card was not named the starting quarterback at Texas. It's also shades of Sam Ehlinger 3 years ago. A young quarterback's going to be throwing it up against a top 25 team in Louisiana that, well, top 25 to me at least, in Louisiana that 100%, looks like they could take you apart offensively and defensively on a game that's going to mean quite a bit to a bunch of us, not the least of which is the folks that are going to be watching the college football playoff and the Big 12 as it shakes out. Because remember, Louisiana went to Iowa State and got a W, just a demonstrative win against an Iowa State team that put together its best season in school history and beat the Pac-12 champ in the Fiesta Bowl with a unanimous All-American tailback. Again, number 21 Texas versus number 23 Lafayette on Louisiana, I should say. I'm going to stop saying Louisiana Lafayette because the folks at Louisiana want to be Louisiana. They are the Raging Cajuns. And I think the line is even going to move a little bit more because Texas is a 9.5-point favorite in this. I like Louisiana here. I like them a bit more now that we seem to know that Hudson Card's going to be the guy taking the starting reps, and it has been taking the starting reps and will continue to start ahead of that game against Texas. But I'm still thinking, against Louisiana, but I'm still thinking you got Levi Lewis over there with Billy Napier. You return every last one of your players on defense. You're able to keep most of your staff intact. You're basically replacing Elijah Mitchell in the backfield, and after that, you're good. You got Lance Lejeune from Maryland to transfer basically back home. It's going to be fairly interesting to see how this goes. But I thought in Brown's reporting, one of the things I wanted to point to is Card threw an incomplete pass and ran for, 8 yards in a blowout win against UTEP. That was really his only action before the Alamo Bowl, where he went 1 of 2 for 5 yards and ran for another 3. Really hasn't had an opportunity to feature, but neither has Casey Thompson, right? And I don't know what exactly it is about football coaches and just hanging on to the football as opposed to having a guy out there that's going to take some chances for you, go get you some W's or, take some L's, be a gunslinger. I would much rather have a guy out there that's just going to grip it and rip it as opposed to a guy that is going to sit back there and take sacks. Oh, again, Sam Ehlinger, 2019, took 9 sacks from Oklahoma. I don't want that. I want you to get rid of the football. I want you to trust these athletes that we have at these wide receiver positions to go out there and make plays. But perhaps Hudson Card will do that. Perhaps Hudson Card will turn out to be the gunslinger type. But also, you got to know this is not Alabama, right? You have outstanding talent, but you're in year 1 with a brand new staff, a brand new culture, a brand new program, and you're facing a top 25 opponent out the gate, and then you got to go to Fayetteville to take on an Arkansas team that feels like they can get a W over you. These are all things that I'm paying attention to. These are all things I think you should be paying attention to. But I should also say that Hudson Card was a tremendous prospect coming out of high school, as was Casey Thompson, and I don't have any compunction about him and what he might be able to do down the line. I just thought this was going to be Casey Thompson's job. Matter of fact, I made Casey Thompson one of the 10 best quarterbacks heading into the season for me, and apparently he ain't even the best quarterback on his team, which, again, wow. Hudson Card either shows you a bunch or Casey Thompson regressed. We'll find out for sure. Hudson Card being the 59th overall prospect in the composite in the class of 2020. Number 7 in the state of Texas, right? And one of the best quarterbacks in that class. And then, of course, Casey Thompson coming out of Newcastle, Oklahoma by way of Southmore. He wasn't as highly recruited. He was barely a 4-star, 291st in the country. But I think that's a product of him playing at Newcastle for the Racers or Southmore for the Jags. Or Southmore's Jags. Somebody is going to tell me that Sophomore is the Jaguars or not the Jaguars in the comments below because I get them confused with Westmore and Moore because Moore's the Lions. Westmore might be the Jags, be the Sophomore Lions. I'm getting lost in Oklahoma preps politics. But I wanted to talk about that for a little bit, talk about what it seems like Steve Sarkisian wants his quarterback, which is basically a guy that's just going to take care of the football and not turn it over and let the defense go win some football games. Maybe that's what you can do with a Pete Kwiatkowski as your defensive play caller. But I'm sure this is going to be a more developing story as we get into September 4th slated games and just what a big deal this is about to be. All right, that's it for me. Deuces.